Well, good morning, Wingham Baptist. How are we today? Welcome to church. Back through the screen again, I know, but I hope you've had a good weekend so far, and it's great to see you even though I can't be here in person. Today we're going to start off by sharing one of the more well-known Psalms, and I wanted to read this one as a way of encouraging you to look past the current situation, that is COVID and lockdown again, and having to go through this and the restrictions that are currently in place for us up here in the Manning Valley. So let me read Psalm 23. Psalm 23, let me read it to you. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And aren't they great words? At a time like this where people are struggling, people are wrestling, people aren't really enjoying having just that little bit of freedom after a long lockdown, and then we've got to go back into restrictions again. But this psalm promises that our great God, the Lord, is our shepherd, and he is looking after us. We lack nothing with him. He leads us to green pastures and lies us down beside quiet waters. He looks after us and protects us. He provides for us. He loves us. And we will be with him forever. And that is a great, great, wonderful thing that we haven't earned. We can't earn it, but he has given it to us as a free gift. And so today, I hope that you're encouraged. Even though we're in this situation, God is still with us. God still loves us, and he's still giving us all his promises. And that's such a wonderful thing. So I hope you can find encouragement in that today. Before we get into the sermon, and like we have been with the video, I get you to read the passage for the day. Let's spend some time in prayer to our great God, praying for some of the things that are on our heart. So join with me in prayer, please. Father, you're an amazing God. You created the universe. You were around before the universe was even created, and you created it, you designed it, and you now sustain it, and we thank you for that, Lord. You are so massive that you blow our minds, and we can't comprehend you, but we know that amongst the massiveness, enormity of this universe, of your creation, so much we don't even know about. You care for us, you love us, and you want us to know you. You want us to journey with you. You want us to be with you. And you love us so, so much that you sent your Son to repair the relationship that we broke, the rejection that we gave to you, and how we went our own way, but you cared for us so much that you restored us. You made it possible for us to come back to you and spend eternity with you again. And we are so humbled by that, Lord, and we thank you so much. I look around the world today and there's so much going on. There's the COVID crisis still, Lord, that is impacting us, but it's impacting so many people around the world. And there are so many countries that don't have the resources that our country have to fight this virus, Lord. And we pray that you will help world leaders and help our country's leaders, Lord, to be able to counter this virus so that people can be healthy again and so that we can get back to the freedoms that we enjoyed. But I look around and I see your people who have given their lives to you, who love you, who serve you, who want your kingdom to be glorified, suffering in their home countries, Lord, for no other reason than they simply have faith in you and express that faith. And there are millions of Christians suffering and being tortured and persecuted for that faith, Lord. And I pray that you will strengthen them, that you will give them that courage to stand up and continue to proclaim your word, continue to live for you, and that they won't cave in, that they won't give in to the pressures from their society, Lord, but they will continue to preach your gospel faithfully and live out your love each day so that your kingdom can grow. I also look around at the moment in the local area, Lord, and there's so many people who are desperate to know you. There are so many people searching for the meaning of life, that as we look at that in Ecclesiastes at the moment, Lord. And they're searching as well, and they don't understand why they can't find satisfaction. But they're not coming to you, and I pray that you will use us to help them find you, Lord, that you will shine out of us, that your light will shine out of us, so that they'll be attracted to you and they will come to you and they will know you, Lord. And I pray to you for the other churches in town as well. I pray that together as a united body for you, we can be your people, and together we can show your love and your grace and your mercy, and people will come into your family, Lord, and they will recognize you for the God that you are. I pray to you, Lord, for so many people who are sick in our church at the moment. I pray to you for Les and his ongoing health issues. I pray to you for Natalie with her health issues and concerns with COVID. I pray to you for Arthur and Janice, and for wisdom for them with the decisions they need to make. And I pray to you for Mark Dallywater's mother over in Perth as she recovers from her operation. I pray to you for other people as well, Lord, who we don't know about, who are suffering in silence. I know that there are a number of people in our congregation who are really struggling with isolation, and COVID and the restrictions make it even harder for them, Lord. But I ask you that you will help us as a family to gather around them at this time and help them to know just how much we love them and how much we care for them and how much we value them, Lord, because they are loved and valued. And as a family, we have that responsibility to make sure they know that. I also think of the ministries, Lord, that our church run, and at the moment they've had to be paused again, and it hasn't been a smooth sailing couple of years with the various things that our church does, like Welcome Place, like Wingham Court, like Playgroup, and the home groups, Lord. And I think of these groups, and I pray to you that you will put COVID on the back burner, that we can enjoy the freedom again, so that these groups that are designed to build relationships and serve our community can in fact do that again, please, Lord. Because we want to serve you, we want to serve the community. We are committed to you and we are committed to the community. And we want your name to be praised by all people, Lord. I look at today's sermon that we're about to go into, and we look at your word, and I pray that your Holy Spirit will open our hearts and our minds to what you have to say to us today, that you will speak to us and that you will explain your word in such a wonderful way that you will give me the right words to say, and that our ears will be opened up to what you have to say so we can be the people that you want us to be. And so I commit these things to you, Lord, And I know that you hear our prayers, and I pray that you answer them in your good timing for your glory. In your Son we ask. Amen. So, now, as it has been our practice with the video, I'm going to ask you to hit pause for a minute and read the passage for the day before I come back and we'll go through the passage together. So the passage for today that I'd like you to read is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, the whole chapter, starting at verse 1, and there's 22 verses in the chapter. We're going to look at the first 17 verses, but have a read of the whole chapter. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and after you've read that, hit unpause, and I'll see you on the other side of that break, and we'll go through the passage together. So hit pause now and read Ecclesiastes chapter 3. So welcome back. Hope you've been able to read the chapter, and it is one of the, or at least the first half of it's one of the more well-known passages in the Old Testament, and we're going to be looking at that. As I said, we're going to be going up to verse 17 today. For those who are joining us for the first time in our Ecclesiastes series, this is week 4 of our series, week 4. And if this is the first time you've joined us, then feel free to jump on our website, winghambaptistchurch.com.au, and there you'll find the first 3 sermons. You'll be able to listen to them just in audio, and you'll be able to catch up to how we've gotten to the point we're at today so far. So, as I said, this is week 4, but the first 3 sermons are on our website. So feel free to jump into them and check that out. And the first 8 verses can be read in one of 2 ways. There is a time. There is a time for everything and a time for every season and every activity under the heavens. And that can be read one of 2 ways, the first 8 verses. The first way it can be read is with a pessimistic outlook. And the second way it can be read is with an optimistic outlook. And the scholars are divided as to which way it is intended by the author. There are a number of scholars who think that it should be read in a pessimistic way, but there's also a number of scholars who think it should be read in a more optimistic sort of way. The pessimistic view looks at it as it's a despairing look at life. There's all these sad things, there's all these bad things, and there's a time for them, and fits into the narrative that we've studied so far, that life is meaningless and death becomes us all. And so this passage reinforces that view that the author has stressed so far. The optimistic outlook takes the view that there is a right time for all things and that God is in control of all things. And there's all these positive things in this list as well, and God is in control of everything. And we will get to, as the chapter moves on, as you will have just read, God really does start to get more of a mention. He doesn't get any mention in the first 8 verses, you may have noticed. There's no mention of God in verses 1 to 8. But in verses 9 through to the rest of the chapter, God does start to get mentioned quite a bit by the author. And so I tend to side more with it should be read with an optimistic outlook, when you read the chapter as a collective whole within the scope of the book. And as you go further into the book, which hopefully you took up my challenge last week to read the whole of Ecclesiastes, all 12 chapters, just in one sitting. And if you did do that, then you'll have read the end of the book and you'll understand where the author heads to. And so the first 3 chapters that we have looked at, and obviously the 3rd chapter today, you'll see where the author takes the book, and you'll see where the author takes this journey of looking for meaning, which culminates at the end of chapter 12. And so I believe an optimistic outlook on these first 8 verses is the better way to read these 8 verses. And if you look at some of these, there's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build. And that's just the first 3 verses, and it goes on. And we need to understand that as we read these things, we're not just talking about activities, a time to plant and a time to uproot is not specifically talking just about gardening. It's also talking about our lives. It's time to plant our lives into something, and there is a time in our life to plant and settle, and there's also a time to uproot and change the situation. If we think about a time to be born and a time to die, it's not just about human life, but it's about our plans and our intentions and the direction that our life is heading. There is a time for a certain direction to start, to be born, and there is also a time for that direction in our life to die and head in a new direction. And so these things need to be read and understood as far broader than just the obvious physical activities that they represent. And if we keep going, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And it goes on. And if we look down the list, our human nature looks at some of those things and goes, that's really good. I like that. A time to be born. I like that. A time to heal. I'll take that as well. A time to laugh. Well, we all like to laugh, don't we? But there's other things in there through this list that we don't like, and we try and reject and push away and avoid where possible. A time to die. Well, we don't like that. We don't like people dying, but we don't like things coming to an end, because sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. It takes us out of our comfort zone because it means we've got to change. Our plans may die. We have to change plans, and we don't necessarily like that. And we like to be in control. And what this passage is saying is there is a healthy time for all these things. All these things are healthy and good in their time. There is a right time for all of these things. There is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Well, we like to speak, don't we? We like our opinions heard. We like our thoughts and our beliefs valued, don't we? But there's also a time to listen. There's a time to accept other people's wisdom. There's a time to accept that other people are right, and we may not like that. Often we don't. There's a time to love and a time to hate. Well, that depends on what side of the argument you're on, doesn't it? As to whether you love something or hate something. But there is a time for all of it. There is a time for war and a time for peace. There is a time for all these things. And as I said, these first 8 verses, there's no mention of God. But as I read through these, I couldn't help but go back to chapter 1. Chapter 1. Now, yes, the teacher says everything's meaningless. Everything's meaningless. But have a listen to this. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, they return there again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye has never seen enough, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And as we've established, that is set in place by God. God put all that in place. And it's a circular motion. And if we read through this list, these times come and go. They come into our life, they go again. Then they come again. We all experience them. And instead of trying to control them and avoid certain things in our life, or prevent things from happening, wouldn't we be better off learning how to embrace them and get the most out of those situations? What things in your life do you try and avoid? What things in your life do you try and get around and not have to work through? But either we just suppress it and push it down, or we just avoid the situation entirely, rather than develop habits and coping mechanisms and working through issues that will actually help us benefit from whatever we are going through at that time. And that's where we're going to go to, because all of these happen with God's knowledge. And if we keep reading, if we jump down to verse 11, it says, He being God, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Let me read that again. Verse 11, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. And so what we see the author doing at this point is saying that this list of stuff in verse 8 that we just read, that we know all these things come and go in our life, and so often we like to take the good things and we like to try and avoid, suppress, push away the bad things and just get through that as quick as possible. We like to try and not stay there and learn from it, just move it on. But the author's saying He has made everything beautiful in its time. And once we start to see situations through that lens, rather than I want that good, I want that good, I want that good, but I don't want that, so throw that away. I don't want to have to cry, so we'll throw that away. And death is bad, so I don't want that. And I don't like that person, so I don't want to listen to that person, but I'm going to speak to that person. I'm going to make sure that person gets put right by my opinion. So I don't want to listen to them. God's saying everything is beautiful in His time, with the intent that it was created for. And we start to see that after 2 chapters of the author really saying everything's meaningless, everything's meaningless, vanity, smoke, everything's useless, we start to see a bit of a change in his attitude that, well, not everything is meaningless and useless. Everything is beautiful in its time. The other thing we see in verse 11 is that God has set eternity in the human heart. God has set eternity in the human heart, and the reason he has set this in our heart is in order to draw us closer to him. We can't fathom it entirely. We can't understand eternity entirely. But God has placed it in our hearts so that we long for God. Because, see, if you speak to most people, almost everyone you speak to, that they recognise there is something after this life. It takes the staunchest of atheists to say, no, there's absolutely nothing. This life, that's all there is. Okay, well, if that's all there is, why do you care about this life? In reality, why care about what goes on this planet if this is all there is? As we've established, no one remembers you later on. Chapter 1. Verse 11. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. So, most people by far suspect there is something after this life. There is eternity set in their hearts. They may not understand what it is or how to get to heaven, or whatever term they want to call it, but they suspect there's something there. And God has put that in our hearts so that we long for him, so that we draw closer to him. So then verse 12, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift from God. So because we have eternity in our hearts, because we have this longing to know God, we have this thing inside of us that we don't fully understand, and we can't fully understand because we're finite creatures. We're limited, whereas God's unlimited, God's infinite. And so, because we are finite, but we have this longing for eternity in our hearts, the best thing we can do is to do good while we live. That each one of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. Find satisfaction in their toil, their work, what they do. And it's interesting because next month in November, we're going to have a bit of a look at work in the Bible. As a bit of a shameless plug for the next series, we're going to be looking at work and faith and work in the Bible. So I'm not going to go too deep into that now, other than to say that work is not a curse. Too often we look at work and we go, can't wait to get to heaven so I don't have to do any more work. Work's not the curse. Work is cursed because of the fall, but work itself is not the curse. We were made to work. God works. God still works, and we were created to work. That is what was built into us, to work. Now, the nature of our work was cursed when the fall happened, but work itself is not the curse. And that's what a big misunderstanding. When we get to heaven, there's going to be work to do. What sort of work? We'll find out when we get there. But work itself was around before the fall. But it's going to be perfect work. It's going to be work that we enjoy, that we love, that we can't actually wait to do. And so one of the best things we can do is to enjoy the work that God has given us in this life. Now, if you're interesting that in this, as he talks about this, and as last week when we spoke about toil, the author doesn't go into why there's inequality in the world. He doesn't talk about why some people are the mega rich and some people are really poor, struggling to live day to day. And he doesn't talk about why that's the case. He doesn't talk about that. Now, part of it will be because of the sinful nature of man, the sinful nature of humans, because we are inherently greedy, looking after ourselves, and that creates that inequality. Did you know that as you watch this on Sunday, that it's actually World Homeless Day? World Homeless Day. And here in Wingham, we do have homeless people. Whether we want to see them or not see them, we do actually have homeless people in Wingham and in the Manning Valley. And it's World Homeless Day. And so let me throw out a little challenge for you to ponder. What can we do as our church with our resources, what we have, to help them, to serve them, to love them, to show them Christ? What can we do? Can we do anything? I think we could. What? Well, you're the Brains Trust. But let me throw that out there. That the author here doesn't go into why there's inequality, but he does say that wherever we are at, whether you're part of the mega rich or whether you're part of the mega poor, be satisfied in your position. Be satisfied in what situation you find yourself in currently, which may be a challenge for some people, bigger challenge for some than for others. But let me tell you that it's very important to do that. And there's all sorts of reasons as to why it's really, really important. A simple example is, it's a well-known fact that's been proven by many studies that if a person can't be happy by themselves, the chances of them being happy in a relationship are minuscule. Because if they can't accept themselves as they are, as an individual, then they take those insecurities and those perceptions of themselves into the relationship, and the relationship struggles. And it doesn't mean the relationship isn't 100% certainty to fail, but it's really going to struggle early. It's going to struggle. If a person cannot accept themselves as they are, as a single, in a relationship, the relationship doesn't solve their personal insecurities. And it's the same with whatever situation we find ourselves in life, in our toil. It doesn't matter whether you're part of the upper class or the lower class. If you can't accept where you're at and find satisfaction in what you're doing now, it doesn't matter what you do, you're always going to be insecure until you can accept who you are in yourself, in God, and in His plans. As we said, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. We need to find that satisfaction. And we're starting to speak a lot more about God and God's plans and who God is and what God has done. And if we read verse 14, the author says, "I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him." People will respect him, will love him, will desire him, will want to serve him, will hold him in the esteem that God deserves to be held in. And he does all these things for that purpose. And God's work, I know that everything that God does will endure forever. It's not a fleeting, passing thing that it's going to endure. It is permanent. And it can't be, nothing can be added to it and nothing can be taken from it. It is complete. It is permanent, it is complete, and it is secure. It is secure because it can't be taken from. We can't take something of God's work from him. No one can. And we can't add to it. Where have we read that before? In the New Testament, because God's salvation offered to all people, God's restoration so that we can know him, so that we can have a relationship with him. We can't take anything from it, and we can't add anything to his plan of salvation. It is permanent, it is complete, and it is secure. God's plans are those things. Isn't it great that they are? Isn't it great that we don't have to sit around worrying, what happens if this happens and God might not know it's going to happen, and so then he's going to have to add stuff in. Where does that leave us? If God's plan doesn't actually work out how God intended it to, and someone takes something away from it, is God going to replace it? Or how? It doesn't work like that. God's plans endure forever, and they are complete, and they are secure. And that includes his plans for us. Everything is beautiful in its time. If we turn to Romans chapter 8, Romans chapter 8. Let me just get there. Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. Verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. All things are beautiful in their time. And that doesn't mean we have to thoroughly enjoy everything. It doesn't mean everything that happens to us in this life we should be throwing parties about. But what it means is they are beautiful in their time because God can use them to help us become more like Christ. And it's through those situations, whether they are fun or not fun, that we can draw closer to God, which is the intent and purpose God has for us, to draw closer to him. That is what he wants. He wants us to draw closer to him, to become more like him, for our lights to shine out of us brighter. And so all these things, which are beautiful in their time, And because of that, God's will endures forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken away from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Fear can be changed to respect, worship, love, honour, obey, glorify. It's not fear as in I am afraid of God. It's fear as in awe, reverence, respect, praise. That's what he's saying. But if we move on to verse 15, whatever is has been already, and whatever will be has been before, and God will call the past to account. And I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both righteous and the wicked. For there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. And so the author's saying that not only do we have all these things in verses 1 to 8, where there is a time for all those things, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, a time for peace, a time to tear and a time to mend. All these things that there is a time for, which are beautiful in their time, the author also says there is a time for judgment. The wicked will be called to account. There will be judgment on those who have done wrong. And there will be justice for those who have been wronged. And our natural response to that is good. That is good, because people who have been wronged it should be made up to them. People who are wicked, they should be made to give an account. They should have judgment. Except for one tiny little problem. We deserve that judgment. It's you and me that have done wrong. It's you and me who have done the wrong thing against God, and it's us who deserve that judgment, isn't it? I'm not perfect. I'm not even close to perfect. But I can tell you that it's because of when Jesus came to earth that my relationship with God has been restored, because Jesus took the judgment that should have been coming to me. He took it and he took the punishment. And that's the promise, that's the belief of the Christian faith. If you're watching this and you're not a follower of Christ, if you're sitting there going, yeah, Jesus, yeah, good guy, but that's the promise of Christianity. That's the promise of God that the Bible talks about. That Jesus came and took our judgment and took our punishment so that we could be restored to God. And so there is a time for all things. And now is a good time for you to be made right with God. Now is the time. Now is a good time. It is a beautiful time for you to ask yourself, where do I stand with God? Now, this series was in part not just to work through the book of Ecclesiastes, but it was designed to compare human wisdom and human thought and human ideas with God's wisdom and God's ideas and God's thoughts. And the last series we did was the I am statements that Jesus made through the book of John. And in those statements we saw how Jesus revealed that not only did he reveal God's kingdom and who God is, but he revealed himself that he is God. And he made those claims that he is, in fact, God. And I just wanted to pause our Ecclesiastes series just for a couple of minutes and look at some of that in relation to what we've been talking about in Ecclesiastes. And if we think back to the statements, I am the gate. I am the gate. Jesus said that in John chapter 10. And he also claimed in the same chapter, and in fact in the same conversation, he said, I am the good shepherd. And if we think about that in terms of what we've been talking about in Ecclesiastes, we're the sheep. We're the sheep, and Jesus is the gate, and the gatekeeper is the Father, God the Father. And as sheep, we sit there going, this is meaningless. This pen is meaningless. I'm sick of being stuck in this pen. This pen's no good. I'm sick of being stuck in this sheep pen. What's the point of it all? Why should I even be here? Occasionally they cut my wool off. Every so often one of the sheep goes missing. They die. What's the point of our life? But see, God, on the other hand, sees it differently, because God the Father is the gatekeeper and Jesus is the gate, and it is through the gate that we can enter into the green pastures, as we read about in Psalm 23. As we are sheep and we move through the gate, we go through Jesus to get to the life that we were created to live, and that is in relationship with God. That is the perfect life that God wanted us to have, that we rejected, and it's through the gate that we can get to that. There's no other way. Sheep cannot climb walls. I'm yet to see a sheep climb a stone wall. And then, as the Good Shepherd, Jesus leads the sheep out to the green pastures. Jesus leads the sheep out to the quiet waters. Jesus protects the sheep. And so we look at the difference, because as sheep, we sit here in this world, this life, which we've already established is a vapour, a mist, compared to the eternity that has been set in our hearts. And we look at it and we go, it's meaningless, just like the sheep do when they're stuck in the pen. But as we follow Jesus, as we go through Jesus and follow the Good Shepherd out, our life is given meaning. And it's only through Jesus that our life is given meaning. And because the gatekeeper, because the shepherd have a far bigger view, they can see the whole picture that we can't see. They say, follow me. Trust me. There is a perfect time, as we've been looking at today. There is a time for everything, and there is a time for sheep to be in the sheep pen, and there is a time for the sheep to go out of the sheep pen and into the green pastures. But the sheep don't know that. They have to trust the gatekeeper and the shepherd. And we need to trust God the Father and Jesus, that they know what they are doing. We are so limited, but we think we know it all. We want to control everything, but in fact, we know nothing compared to them. And that's very hard for us to admit, because as we said earlier, we like to control everything. We like to be able to pick and choose what parts of life we have, but it is all beautiful in its time. And God's work is permanent, it is complete, and it will endure forever. And that's something we need to trust him for. So what do we do with this? What do we do with Ecclesiastes 3? What do we do with what we've discussed today? How does that affect us tomorrow? And let me suggest that I would like to challenge you to be satisfied, thankful, and purposeful. And when I say that, satisfied, thankful, purposeful, I mean in a wholehearted, genuine way. I don't mean a grumbling when a 4-year-old gets caught doing something wrong and they have to apologise and they go, yeah, I'm really sorry. I don't mean that. I mean in a genuine, wholehearted, honestly thankful way. Because we need to be satisfied with where we're at now. Don't keep looking at other people and where they're at in life, because that's not where you're at. You're at where you're at, and it is beautiful in its time. And wherever you find yourself now, look for God in that. Be satisfied with where God has you now. Doesn't mean you have to love it and think it's the most wonderful thing on earth, but in that situation you can and will find God if you look and be satisfied with it. There's a difference between satisfied and love and enjoy, and I'm challenging you to be satisfied in it. But not just to be satisfied, but be thankful for it, because in that situation there are things that you can learn, there are things that you can take from that situation that will help you on your journey forward from the pen to the green pastures. There are things in this current situation that God can use to shape you into who he is creating you to be. And that's something that, again, we need to trust God with. But not just satisfied and thankful, but also to be purposeful. Be purposeful in what we do, in how we see things, in how we think, in how we act and live and love and conduct ourselves day to day. Because there are so many people who just get carried along by the stream and they never really question anything. They never really deliberately set out to achieve that over there. They just float along with the stream of society and they wind up over there, but God's over there. Be purposeful in your situation, to be looking for God, to be looking to be guided by God, to be seeking the situation that God wants us to understand and be satisfied and thankful in. And to use our resources, both personally as individuals and corporately as a church, in a way that pleases God. Just like we spoke about earlier with today being World Homeless Day. It's just one example, and there's dozens of different ways that we can use our resources. And I'm not saying that's the number one best option. It is a very good option. But there's also quite a number of very valued and valid options that we could choose to use our resources. But we need to be purposeful about it. We need to be deliberate in doing that. To be thankful, satisfied and purposeful in our choices, in our attitudes, in our conduct, and that will draw us closer to God. See, if we want to look for those those characteristics, we have to look no further than Jesus on the night he was betrayed. If you think back to the night he was betrayed, he was thankful to his Father. As they walked, he prayed to his Father for himself, for his disciples, and for the disciples that would come, the followers that would come after he was gone. He was thankful for them. He was satisfied that he was in the Father's will, that this is what the Father had willed and had decided needed to happen, and he was satisfied that the Father knew what he was doing. And purposeful? Jesus was very purposeful. As the people came to arrest him, we read in John's Gospel that he marched out to meet them. He didn't sit there hiding behind a tree, waiting for them to find him. He marched out. He was purposeful in what he was called to do. He was thankful. He was satisfied. And he was purposeful. And that's what we need to be in our situations too. There's so much more we could say in that. But let me just leave you with this question. Have you given God control over your life? Because our nature wants to control it. Our nature wants to take the good, leave the bad. Our nature wants to be in control. And then we let God have control when we're already in control ourselves anyway. So really God isn't actually in control. God's just an advisor. But if you've never given God full control over your life, let me tell you, it's the most liberating thing ever. It is the most amazing thing to say to God, it's yours. My life is yours. And hand it to him. Have you done that with all your life? Have you done it with some areas of your life but not with other areas? Have you done it with some parts but not other parts? Have you done it with none of your life? Let me leave you with this. In being satisfied, thankful and purposeful in your life, living it for Jesus, give him control. Give him control. And by giving him control, you will experience a peace that you've never had before. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you offer your peace to us. You offer your love. You offer a relationship with you. And everything we experience in this life, it's not always fun. It doesn't always make us do cartwheels down the street, but it is beautiful in its time. And we pray to you that you will help us to see things from your perspective, not from our perspective. Because your perspective is so much broader and so much bigger than we can possibly comprehend. That's why you're God and we're not. And so I ask you that you will help me and help everyone else to be the people you want us to be. And I pray to you for this in your Son's name. Amen. So thank you for joining us today. Let me encourage you to be calling each other at this time again as we're back into restrictions and as we're back on videos. Please be ringing each other up, encouraging each other, supporting each other. Don't wait for someone to call you. Give them a call. Say hi to them. You'll still get the same satisfaction because they'll ask you how you're doing anyway. It doesn't matter who made the call. So pick up the phone and call a couple of people. Have a chat. Say g'day. We're a family together. And a family supports one another, loves one another, encourages one another. And that's the love that we have for each other that the rest of our community desires so much. That's the love that's going to make us stand out. A love for each other. And so I pray to you that you will be doing that and sharing the hope we have in God with everyone in the community as well. At this time when there's so much to be struggling and stressing and worrying about, let your hope and your peace shine through in your joy. So I thank you for joining me this morning. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week through the screen again. See ya.